Moving countries can be one of the most exciting and most challenging things you'll ever do. And we're here to take one big worry off your plate: your taxes. At Expat Taxes, we understand the complexities of Irish tax from your perspective as an expat and tailor our advice to your needs. With decades of expertise, our team at Expat Taxes will help you navigate tax residency, cross-border taxation, reliefs and returns, and will work with your country's tax advisor to make sure your taxes are sorted. Whether you're an individual or a corporation coming from Australia, the United States, the UK, or anywhere in the world, we want to help you. So visit us at expattaxes.ie to book a consultation today, and let's make moving to Ireland easier together.
Welcome to Tax Bites for Expats, the top tax tips you want to know as an expat. The podcast is here to help answer the common queries and concerns expats have when moving to or from Ireland. Complex taxes explained simply. We'll focus on the Irish and international tax issues to be aware of to ensure you save time, money, and stress.
Hi everyone, podcast producer Matt here, stepping in for Steph as the tax assessment period starts to round itself off a bit. This episode is part 2 of Steph's recording with Sean Kearney of Amvoy Wealth. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, scroll up in your feed and give it a listen. Sean is an expert financial planner, helping Irish expats in the US to plan for their future and avoid the pitfalls of the tricky US tax system and what Irish citizens commonly ignore regarding managing US finances. In part 2, we hear about Sean's best approaches to financial management, some great tips for Irish expats that really brings together their discussion so far, and a bit of behind-the-scenes advisory banter that you won't hear anywhere else. Enjoy.
I guess my role in this, if somebody said to me, what is your role in this whole process? My role in this is I project manage, I guess, more than anything else. Yes, the financial planning piece, which is a huge piece, because again, it goes back to the piece that I said, that, if you don't know where your destination is, then it really doesn't matter what route you take. So the financial planning piece is incredibly important, i.e. let's decide or try and establish what life is going to look like for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Once we understand what that looks like, now let's start layering back in the money. And as part of that money piece, let's talk to Steph. Let's talk to estate planners. Let's talk to specialist advisors to make sure that we're doing everything in the most tax efficient manner possible. And that's another piece. I am not one of these people, and I genuinely don't think you are either. There are a lot of tax advisors out there and a lot of clients out there that want to do things in the most tax efficient manner possible. So give me a solution that allows me to pay zero tax and I'm happy. And again, I spoke to a tax advisor over here, a US guy that deals with very, very high net worth individuals. I asked him about that. I said, do you take into account a client's wishes or a client's lifestyle requirements going forward? Or is it purely tax based? And his answer to me, and I loved it, was he goes, we deal with high net worth individuals, really high net worth individuals, but I never want the tail to be wagging the dog. I never want them to take the tax solution that's purely a tax solution. Forget about what life looks like around it. Because I think what a lot of people need to realize, and again, this is a wealth problem, I guess, the wealthier you are, the more tax becomes a problem. But for these people, I think they need to, try and understand, let's live life first and let's put the tax piece around it. Because, and again, it'd be interesting your thoughts on this, but a lot of tax strategies are very similar to investment strategies. And that's what they ultimately are, because going into tax efficient vehicles, things change. The world changes, legislation changes. So just because you go into a tax vehicle today doesn't mean that in 10 or 15 years, when you think that tax vehicle is going to mature, pay everything out tax-free, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that it's going to be in the future. So it's about making sure, I guess, let's not try and be too smart. Let's be smart. Let's pay as little tax as we can. But let's live life, first of all, because at the end of it, all you're going to end up with is a lot of money in the bank when you're dead.
To give to other people. Do you know what, right? When you're saying that, to give you my token sort of what you're saying, I'll give you an example, right? We have a coffee machine and I love my morning coffee, right? It's kind of like the highlight of my day. It's like a lot about how exciting it says a lot about how exciting my life is, doesn't it? And we had a conversation the other day about the price of beans. Okay. So you could go out and you can buy coffee beans and you can get, well, mediocre coffee beans. Chances are I probably wouldn't drink the coffee as often if it wasn't that nice. Or you can get the nice coffee beans, which, I think it works out like €1 a cup, which is not going to break the bank compared to what you'd pay elsewhere. I think my point is this. Sometimes, Ireland's a nice cup of coffee. In other words, it's not a cheap cup of coffee, but if it's the coffee you want, have it. And I often think of it like that. Like, don't deprive yourself of the ability to be where you want to be in the notional idea that, oh, I'm going to save all this money and what am I going to do with it? Like, exactly what you're saying is, money is there to be used and to be spent. And I think people do a bit of research on the internet and they think, oh my goodness, this is going to cost us a fortune. Do you know what? It probably is going to cost more money. You can dress it up whatever way you want. But sometimes that's worth it. And having somebody help you navigate that, most people are actually okay with that concept. Most people don't mind the concept of it's going to cost you marginally or somewhat more to come back to do X, Y, and Z. That to me often is a happy client. The client who's told, don't ever drink coffee again. It's bad for you and it costs you money and you're going to be miserable, but you'll have loads of money in your bank account. That's not a happy client. That's just a client with money in the bank. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, and that's the planning thing. That's why I park the money piece. If I can understand and if I can get the client to fully understand what it is that they want life, and again, the line I use is, tell me what life looks like if somebody else is bankrolling. Let's not worry. Now, you're assuming the clients aren't going to come back and say, I want a Ferrari and I want 7 houses and I want.
I was going to tell you that's what I wanted. You don't offer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Someday, please God, I'll be able to give all of my clients $1 million and let them go off and I'll bankroll their life or pick maybe one a year. But that's the reality. If you can get somebody to understand that piece, you can modify that and you can say, okay, this is what it's going to cost. One of the things that I get over here all the time is clients coming to me and saying, and I like this because it's a lot of an easier process of planning. Somebody says, I'm not going home. And I go, okay, then it's back to that piece where it's the straight road, it's the big desert road, financial planning. You're here today, you're going to die in the future in the US. So we're planning in the US. I suppose just to be clear, being an Irish person permanently resident in the US is a lot easier from a financial planning for a tax perspective than an Irish person that's US connected living in Ireland. All right, say that.
Completely agree with that. Completely agree with that.
So again, they're the clients that are easier for me to do and get them to plan out. And when you dig deep, it goes back, and they're the same. I'll sit down with them and I say, well, what does the next 10, 15, 20 years look like? And when you start to dig deep into it, the reason some of these people aren't going home is because they don't think they can afford it. Because I'm earning great money over here. I go home, my salary will be 50%. I can't afford to live on half the salary I have, but they're trying to work out living on half the salary they have, paying $7 for a cup of coffee, paying $6,000 for a 2-bed, low floor apartment in the middle of Manhattan. None of them things are what it costs back in Ireland. So again, what we're able to do is we're able to sit down and go, well, if you're telling me and what I'm hearing or what you're saying is that in an ideal world, you'd move back to Ireland or Ireland would become more of a piece of your life. Well, then let's look at what that looks like because people are making the assumption that they can't afford it without having any idea. And these are the very people that are going to die at age 93 and a half, somewhere upstate New York, living in the forests with 5, 10, 15 million sitting in their bank account. That's what the financial planning that I do does for people. It's about taking that 15 million, spreading it back over your lifestyle. Once you get to 80, 85 years of age, and again, this age is increasing. I call it the slowdown part of your life because once you get to a certain age, you've no choice.
But most people as well, I find, and I don't know if you find this, there is a pull to Ireland at that point.
It never leaves them.
Yeah, there's always this feeling of, I want to go back now. I want to go back.
Yeah, it never leaves them. There's no question. But again, what stops them? What stops them? Look, a lot of what stops them is there are touch points over here in the States. To me, if your children get past halfway through high school, which is secondary school, you've created a huge issue for yourself if you want to go back to Ireland because they will probably finish school here. They will probably go on to college here. They will qualify out of college here. They will stay here. They will get boyfriends or girlfriends here. They'll have kids here. And now all of a sudden you have a huge dilemma as in, if I go back to Ireland and my kids are here, My grandkids are potentially here. So that creates an issue. Again, the world is a small place. One of the things I love about New York, everyone has good days and bad days over here in New York. And for me, on a bad day, my thought frame was always, it's a 6 hour flight back to Dublin. If I really need to get to Dublin
Not that far.
tomorrow, so long as I make that decision before 6 o'clock this evening, I can be at JFK at 9 o'clock tonight, back in Ireland tomorrow morning with the time difference. So it's not far away. But again, that pull over here, it's important that you understand that, once you come over here, as you start to get older, if Ireland is part of that piece, there is a time where you probably stop yourself completely, allowing yourself to go back from a family perspective. And that is probably from college age to you're probably losing 10, 15, 20 years at that stage. Yes, people will then go back at 70, 80 years of age because it's what they want to do. But in my world, there is a happy medium that's there. And it certainly takes some planning. But can we live between both? Can we spend X amount of time in Ireland and X amount of time in the US? Expensive, possibly. But again, that's something that we can look at. And it's funny, I was talking to a guy at a networking event the other day, and that's exactly what he does. And I said to him, when do you usually go back? And he said, I usually go back from the start of December to the end of February. And I started laughing. I said, what in all this good and holy would bring you back to Ireland to what people would consider the worst time of year in Ireland? And he says, well, first of all, it's Christmas and everyone's home at Christmas. And he said, second of all, I know it's going to be damp and cold, potentially snowy in January and February, but I live upstate New York. It's not great up there in January and February either. So that's his piece. So all these things are possible for people, but it takes planning. And particularly that piece, where are you tax resident? What we don't definitely want to do is we don't want to get called tax resident in both places. There is a double tax agreement, but that's what we talk about, the planning piece. It's about understanding what we can do and then how we can do it.
There's the other thing as well, and I mention this because I think there'll be people listening who are interested in this. We routinely get asked by some of our US clients, and I say, well, by US clients, I mean the spouse, let's say, the US citizen with no previous Irish connection. And, we will have a conversation with them and we'll determine through a discussion that they have a non-Irish domicile and they're coming back to Ireland, and they often have quite a specific fact pattern and a specific desire to invest in a certain way, right? So without kind of boring people with the detail, I think my summary and takeaway for anybody listening to the podcast would be that Sean is the person to talk to if you're in that situation. And we've worked with many of them because I suppose as much as we're talking and focusing on, well, what happens to my US position? There are considerations from a tax perspective for that client when they come to Ireland as to how the money should be invested through the lens of the US authorities, through the lens of the revenue commissioners, completely legitimately on both sides of the water, but with a nice, low Irish tax bill. So if you're in that category, reach out to Sean because he's one of the very few people who is licensed to be able to advise US citizens in Ireland on Irish and US financial issues. You're in a special space. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us.
No, and that is key. It's there and it's possible for everyone. Again, it goes back to that piece where people don't seem to want to go and get advice for these things. They want to, I won't even say bury their head in the sand, but they just do what they do. And a very simple piece out there, particularly for US connected individuals, is if you are resident in Ireland or resident in the US and your money is sitting in one of the life companies, you need to get advice about that.
And what's a life company? What would you describe? You don't need to name them. You don't need to name them per se, but for anyone who's not sure what you mean by that.
The big insurance companies, again, the banks, if you have money invested through pretty much 90% of the financial advisors or financial institutions in Ireland, it's probably invested in the wrong place. Now, wrong place from a tax perspective. It's wrong because it's not as tax efficient. Irish advisors tend not to understand this. I struggle with it because it's not black and white. That's why you need to take on this whole, I guess it goes back to that project management piece where I can bring in the tax specialist. I can bring in the investment specialist. These are the people that we need to sit down and get the right advice for. And obviously, the more money you have, the more of an issue this becomes because the simple reason that, you're going to pay more tax on more money. There's some things you can't avoid. If you're a US connected individual living in Ireland, you're paying into a company pension, that's going to sit, 99% of them are going to sit in life companies. There's very little you can do because your company controls that. But again, that needs to form part of your annual tax return. So again, for me, that's a piece where we need to get proper advice in order to make sure that it's been invested in the most tax efficient manner, or that we understand why it's not been invested in the most tax efficient manner.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, people want that assurance, don't they? Like everybody wants to know that things have been done properly, tax efficiently, and compliant, essentially.
Yeah. And back to a point that you made earlier, the IRS, or the US government, already know if a US connected individual has a financial account in Ireland, because the onus is on the financial institutions to report back to the US. So if you go in and you open something as simple as a bank account, one of the questions that's on it is, are you a green card holder or a US passport holder? You have two choices at that point. You can either be honest if you are and say yes, or you can be dishonest, potentially commit fraud and say, no, you're not. Now, it doesn't have a huge impact on the opening of the account, but from that perspective, the financial institution will report to the US that you have that account. So they already have this information, that you have bank accounts, that you have investment accounts, that you have pensions, that any of these things that you have, that information is sitting somewhere in the US. Is it getting used at the moment? Potentially not. But it goes back to that piece, I guess, that we're all getting more and more akin to, and that is AI.
Big data.
The ability for AI to go in and manipulate or extrapolate facts from information is increasing daily. I was at an investment conference a couple of weeks ago, and a bond speaker stood up and he said that one of the things he said was, for the past 30 years, we have been getting information, all the information on every mortgage that is taken out daily in the US. So they have all the information on all the mortgages going back over 30 or 50 years. Now, he said, that is so much information. There's very little that we could do with it. Again, the needle in the haystack piece. He says, but now AI allows us to go into that whole database of 50-year mortgages and extrapolate exactly what information that we need to be able to say, okay, here is now, I think it's mortgage-backed investment products that they create out of this. But again, the ability is there. And again, who knows when that will start to happen? I'm not sitting here and telling people to not sleep at night. If you're not sleeping at night because you're worried that the IRS are going to come and knock on your door, then reach out to Steph or reach out to me, and let's alleviate that issue.
And as well as that, I sometimes do consults with clients and they'll say, I've been so worried about this, I've been up at night. It's rarely as bad as people think it's going to be when they actually are proactive about it. So I think that's, anyone listening to this thinking, oh, what should I do? This all sounds too hard. Just do this one simple thing. Open your computer, go into your email and send an email to either info@expattaxes.ie, or your email address is
info@amvoywealth.ie.
Brilliant. And if you send those emails,
it does. Look, the reality is, the onus is on you from a legal perspective as a US connected individual to do a US tax return on an annual basis. And if you have never done it, it's an issue, but it's not a big issue. And there are ways, there's a streamlined process there that allows you to become compliant. Now, it costs money, not massive money. It can be done and brings you right up to date. It's not about, oh, I'm 50 years of age, I haven't done a tax return since I came back from the US 1979. I don't think them numbers work out, but it'll only go back a number of years. You get the information in, and then you are fully compliant and fully up to date. And compliance is all the US want. In general, what the US want is they just want to understand and know what their citizens are doing around the world. The treaty means that Ireland is a higher tax country than the US across the board. So the likelihood of you paying more tax when you're doing this tax return is very slim.
From a US perspective, it's very
it's very slim. And again, that's why, if you're leaving the US, close things down over there, pay your taxes over there, because it becomes, it saves you money in the long run.
Definitely from a state perspective as well, take advice on breaking your state residency position if possible.
Yeah.
Look, we could talk all day. Like it's one of those things.
I've got all day. It's only 10:18 for me in the morning.
It's 4 on a Friday evening here, so 3 actually. I'm an hour ahead. Sean, thank you so much. We will put details in the show notes of your email, which is info@amvoywealth.com. People, if they contact you, should mention the podcast, maybe in the subject line, if they
100%.
want to arrange a free call. Thank you very much for offering that to our listeners. And there is numerous ways to work with you. The first step is to reach out. And of course, if they want to have a call, both from a financial and a tax perspective, we can organise that. And ideally, and possibly with a US advisor on the call as well. So we can cover off on US Irish tax issues in conjunction with yourself. I think that's a really solid value proposition for anybody who's listened to this and is a bit worried. And of course, there's plenty of info on your website and our website as well if people just want to DIY it, which we don't recommend, but there is people who do that.
Yeah, look at that. It goes back to the piece that, and again, I've seen it and you've seen it, where people have come and taken the initial advice that they've got and believe that they could go off and save money on their own and do it on their own. You'll generally find that they've created a mini mess and they'll come back to you and it'll actually cost them more than if they'd have come the first time. So look, I go back to my point of earlier. There are very few people that know what they're doing. 90% of US tax advisors, 90% of Irish tax advisors do not understand the cross-border nature of what needs to be done. What Stephanie has been able to create, I guess, from a tax perspective for my clients, and I assume her own clients, is she has been able to find advisors, US tax advisors, that understand the connection between the two. And that's the key to it. You can go to the best US tax advisor there is out there and get them to do your taxes. If he does not understand how the treaty works or what the issues are that he needs to look at from an Irish perspective, it's a waste of time, as is also the top US tax advisor and the top Irish tax advisor. If they work together but don't understand the mechanics of the treaty, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 4 years. A lot of my 4 years has gone about trying to find the right people, because I don't want to work with the wrong people. I can absolutely say that Stephanie is, without question, the best person that I've met in this area.
Thank you.
For what she
that
did.
Wasn't a plant. You're very kind.
Absolutely. It's a fact. And I think that's important. And I think that's borne out by the fact that I do trust you. It has changed my practice by working with you.
You're very good. Thank you.
And absolutely, I would recommend, for me.
Likewise.
Stop. Yes, stop.
No, it's like we're not Irish anymore. Irish people don't do this.
It's a pity. That's the Americanism coming out. It's a pity we're not on Instagram now. We can get people to comment what they think of us below. But no, it's, for me, I do care about people. I do care about clients. For me, get advice, get it somewhere. I don't care whether it's me, because the reality is, and I think Steph, you're probably the same, I have enough clients. There's more than enough clients out there. I will never be able to service everyone that needs this service, and I don't think you will be either from a time perspective. I don't think there is a huge option out there at the minute. I would love to see more advisors in this area. As I said, I had no route map to follow. And if anyone wants to ring me up and ask how do you get into the US, I'm not going to tell you, because you can go through 4 years, the hell that I went through.
That's trade secret now.
That said, everyone has a price. But yeah, no, absolutely go out there and get advice. Contact me, contact Steph. We do work closely together from that perspective. And we will certainly look after you.
Thank you so much. It's a great start to the weekend to have recorded the podcast. You're starting your day. I hope you go off and buy yourself a $7 coffee. I'm going to go and make myself one of my €1 cups that I...
And yeah, your €1 cup probably tastes a lot better than mine.
Well, I did see what you were drinking there, the cup, and I can tell you it tastes better than what you're drinking, but I'm a bit of a...
You have no idea what's in that cup. That's actually green tea. That's a venti. You couldn't possibly afford a venti coffee over here. No chance.
You've changed, Sean. You can't. If you tell anyone in Castleknock you drink green tea.
They always drank green tea because I couldn't afford milk. It's a lot easier.
Better free.
It's no more than your €1 coffee. It's free where I work, so it's okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna go put my coffee machine on. Have a brilliant weekend.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Tax Bites for Expats. Please do leave a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcast. And as always, remember to take professional tax advice specific to your personal circumstances before acting or refraining from action in connection with the matters dealt with in this series. The material in this podcast is intended to give general guidance only.